when a founding Western nation decides that a 70-year-old international treaty is actually protecting convicted criminals and, well, getting in the way of border control, what happens next? What happens when that government just decides, to tear it up?
We're diving deep today into the UK, a really key U.S. ally, and they seem to be attempting maybe the most radical existential shift in their approach to sovereignty in decades.
Yeah, this looks serious. The new conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, she's unveiled this dramatic Stronger Borders plan, and she's pledging, well, nothing less than the toughest reforms Britain has ever seen.
And this isn't just talk, is it? The sources lay out some, frankly, astonishingly high targets. The stated mission from the party itself is deporting 150,000 illegal migrants every single year.
Every year, wow. Aiming for 750,000 removals over just one 5-year parliamentary term.
Exactly. So our mission here is to really examine the sources detailing this, well, monumental hardline shift.
Right. We need to look at the legal hurdles, this new aggressive enforcement force they're planning to build, and the huge political risks involved in essentially prioritizing border sovereignty by leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. Okay, let's try and unpack this. Starting with just the sheer scale. I mean, the proposed operation is huge. A commitment to remove 150,000 people annually. That's massive.
It really is.
So, based on the sources, how does a government even begin to plan the infrastructure needed to, physically achieve that kind of mass removal?
Well, this is where the budget and the specific structure become really critical. The plan isn't just tweaking the existing system.
Right.
It calls for creating a brand new, heavily funded agency, a $1.6 billion annual removals force.
$1.6 billion a year.
Yeah, which is nearly double the current enforcement budget, which sits around $820 million. And what's particularly fascinating and definitely controversial is that this force is explicitly modeled on the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, ICE.
Ah, ICE. Okay, that comparison alone, it immediately signals an intent to move towards much more assertive, centralized enforcement, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's a strong signal.
So what specific new powers would this $1.6 billion force actually get to try and hit that 150,000 target?
Well, creating this force is definitely meant to signal seriousness. It will completely replace the current immigration enforcement body, and it would be granted, quote, sweeping new powers to identify and detain migrants.
Sweeping new powers like what, specifically?
Crucially, the sources detail powers, including the ability to use live facial recognition technology without warning in public spaces.
Wow, without warning.
Yeah, to identify illegal immigrants quickly. And the overall policy goal is pretty comprehensive. They plan to ban all asylum claims from anyone arriving illegally.
Ban them outright.
And they're pledging to deport small boat arrivals within just 1 week.
A week? That's incredibly fast. But look, banning asylum claims and hitting 150,000 removals a year, that needs serious diplomatic muscle too, right? The UK can't just deport people if other countries won't take them back.
Precisely. And the sources detail a very clear strategy for, well, diplomatic pressure. Migrants would be deported either back to their home countries or to safe third countries willing to accept them.
Okay, but how do they guarantee cooperation?
By threatening serious, tangible consequences for noncompliance. We're talking about cutting aid packages, limiting visa access for nations that refuse to take back their own citizens or, fail to cooperate on these returns.
So using leverage.
Yes. The party seems to see this kind of aggressive leverage as essential to ending what they see as cycles of delay and appeal.
Right. And this is where the strategy makes its most direct attack on the existing way of doing things. The core of this plan involves withdrawing the UK from the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR. Why? Why is an international treaty drafted way back in the 1950s one the UK actually helped create? Why is that now seen as the single biggest obstacle to border control?
Well, the core justification, as presented by, the proponents of this plan, is the absolute necessity of stopping what they're calling lawfare.
Lawfare. Okay, define that for us.
They argue that this term describes the continuous sort of tactical use of litigation court cases as a political weapon, a weapon designed specifically to attack and overturn democratically decided policies and what they call common sense.
So they're saying lawyers are using treaties against the government's policies.
Essentially, yes. They contend that legal professionals are using these, well-meaning treaties in ways that were never intended by the people who wrote them, specifically to frustrate removal efforts.
Can you clarify the difference here? There's the ECHR, and then there's the Human Rights Act in the UK. which treaties are actually on the chopping block to stop this lawfare?
That's a really important distinction. So the ECHR is the international treaty itself. It's overseen by the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg.
Okay.
The Human Rights Act, or HRA, that's the domestic UK law. It's the law that basically incorporates the ECHR's rights directly into British legal cases.
Got it.
The Conservative Party plan is to withdraw from the ECHR entirely, repeal the domestic HRA, and also leave the Council of Europe Convention on Action Against Trafficking in Human Beings.
Wow, okay. So it's a three-pronged legal withdrawal, just clearing the decks completely.
That seems to be the intention, to remove those specific legal avenues.
And the sources, they pinpoint specific articles within the ECHR that are supposedly being, well, weaponized like this. It's not the whole treaty causing problems.
No, and that's the crux of the government's frustration as they present it. They specifically highlight two articles. First, Article 3, which grants protection from torture.
Right.
They argue its definition has been broadened so much it now protects foreign criminals who just claim they face some kind of generalized danger if they're sent back.
Okay, and the second one?
More significantly, perhaps, is Article 8. That guarantees the right to private and family life. And our sources cite this powerful example for them of members of the Rochdale grooming gang.
Yes, I remember that case. Horrific.
Exactly, convicted of terrible crimes. But they used Article 8 family life claims to fight deportation for years and years. The government argues this use of Article 8 has just expanded way beyond its original intent, and it ends up prioritizing a criminal's sort of comfort over the public security.
That does sound like a major block. If a treaty is being interpreted and used this way, and the International Court in Strasbourg won't change its interpretation, what's the alternative then?
Well, Kemi Badenoch's stance on this seems to be one of zero compromise when it comes to sovereignty. She stated very clearly that if these international treaties block the government's ability to act, and if they can't be reformed,
Then what?
then the UK must leave them, issuing, and this is the direct quote, no hesitation, no apology.
No hesitation, no apology. Strong words.
Very. The party apparently views trying to reform the ECHR as basically a lost cause. They believe the court in Strasbourg has shown no real willingness to accept fundamental changes to how it interprets these rights.
Okay, but this raises a really crucial point, one that critics bring up a lot. Even if the UK does withdraw from the ECHR, what about all the other international agreements the UK has signed, particularly the Refugee Convention?
Yes, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, you're right. This is a major constraint on the whole operation they're planning. Critics argue, and the sources actually confirm this, that while the ECHR is a, let's say, useful political target,
Right.
and it does protect some high-profile foreign criminals from deportation, it actually has only a marginal effect on stopping asylum claims overall.
So it's not the main driver of the numbers.
Arguably not. The 1951 Refugee Convention and that Convention on Action Against Trafficking in Human Beings, the one they also want to leave, are probably the bigger legal challenges for mass removals based on asylum status. So even if the UK ditches the ECHR, it still has obligations under the Refugee Convention, like not deporting someone to a place where their life or freedom would be genuinely threatened.
Which suggests just leaving the ECHR might not be the silver bullet for the migration numbers problem they think it is.
It suggests it might not solve the core numbers problem without also addressing these deeper international obligations. It's a complex.
That context is absolutely vital. Okay, so this radical legal move, pulling out of the ECHR and potentially others, it's meant to unlock specific, long-sought policy objectives. The conservative leadership actually outlined a very specific list of things they say they must be able to achieve for the UK to be considered truly sovereign. Let's explore these 5 tests they say the ECHR currently blocks.
Right. These 5 objectives, they're kind of the policy framework the government is aiming for. They represent their definitive standard for parliamentary control over UK law, free from Strasbourg's influence.
Okay, let's start with the one that links most directly to the ECHR debate we've just had.
That would be the first one, the deportation test. This objective aims squarely at ensuring Parliament, not international courts, has the final say on who stays in the UK.
And crucially,
this means allowing the government to remove foreign criminals and illegal immigrants, even if they raise challenges based on family life, directly neutralizing that expansive use of ECHR Article 8 we talked about.
Got it. Okay, moving beyond immigration specifically, the second test seems focused on protecting the armed forces.
Correct. That's the veterans test.
Yeah.
The aim here is pretty clear. Stop what they call vexatious and frivolous legal attacks on military personnel. Basically, ensuring UK FEMAS members can operate in conflict zones without the constant threat of being dragged through the courts with endless legal challenges when they return home.
Okay. And the third objective. That speaks directly to social policy, public services.
That's the fairness test. This test is explicitly designed to prioritize British citizens for things like social housing and other public services. The stated rationale is this belief that, quote, charity begins at home.
So addressing the public feeling that maybe non-citizens are getting resources ahead of citizens.
That seems to be the sentiment it's targeting, yes. Addressing the perception that illegal migrants might be accessing state resources while citizens are struggling.
Right. We've got two more tests that broaden the scope beyond immediate border security. Tell us about the fourth one. It seems focused on law and order.
The fourth is the justice test. This one aims for two things, really. First, making sure prison sentences actually reflect what Parliament intended without judges interfering too much, ensuring criminals serve the time lawmakers decided on.
And the second part.
The second part is granting authorities more power to stop highly disruptive protests, think just stop oil type things, without the courts stepping in and deeming those police actions disproportionate under human rights law. That's been a recent point of friction in the UK.
Okay. And finally, a test focused on the economy and development. That's the prosperity test. This seems highly relevant in the current legal climate around environmental issues.
It really is. It's perhaps the most forward-looking of the five. This objective is intended to prevent courts from treating action on climate change as some kind of fundamental human right that can be used to legally challenge government decisions.
Stopping lawsuits against big projects.
Exactly. The policy goal seems to be avoiding endless legal challenges to major infrastructure projects, new roads, power plants, energy developments, you name it, ensuring the government can move quickly to boost the economy without getting bogged down in judicial reviews based on climate rights arguments.
Okay. So you take this whole aggressive package, a new ICE-style force, the mass deportation target, rejecting the ECHR, these five tests. What does it all mean for the UK's political stability and its international standing? This feels like a huge political gamble, especially with competition from parties like Reform UK.
Oh, this strategy is absolutely a fight for political survival, you could say. The key political motive, according to the sources we've seen, is clearly to try and neutralize Nigel Farage's Reform UK party.
How so?
By trying to prove to voters that the Conservative Party has the political courage and the backbone to deliver on border security. They're trying to appeal directly to those voters who feel let down by previous failures to control migration numbers.
But the sources also indicate this shift has created pretty severe internal conflict and drawn intense criticism from within their own party ranks, right?
It absolutely has. The political risk is substantial. You have figures like the former Tory Attorney General Dominic Grieve, a respected voice, publicly warning that this plan to ditch the ECHR constitutes a death wish for the Conservative Party.
A death wish. Strong words again.
His argument is that it risks making them almost indistinguishable from Reform UK, and that could potentially lose them those moderate sort of one-nation Tories who value human rights commitments and international stability. They might flee to, say, the Liberal Democrats.
And the international optics. Withdrawing from such a foundational human rights treaty, that must be difficult to ignore on the world stage.
Incredibly difficult. Critics constantly point out the potential for diplomatic isolation. The only other country to leave the ECHR since 2022 is Russia, which was expelled after invading Ukraine.
Not great company to be in.
Exactly. Liberal Democrat leaders have seized on this, suggesting withdrawal would put the UK alongside Vladimir Putin, severely undermining Britain's historic image as a champion of human rights and democracy globally.
So if we just zoom out for a moment, this deep dive really shows the UK facing a stark choice, doesn't it?
It really does. It seems to be a choice between maintaining these long-standing international legal ties, which were originally designed to protect human rights globally, or asserting absolute parliamentary sovereignty to rapidly enforce its borders and, crucially for them, deliver the policy outcomes that they believe voters have demanded.
Yeah.
And the proponents, they genuinely seem to believe these changes are the only way left to rebuild public trust and prove that when people vote for decisive change, it actually translates into real policy delivery. It's fascinating. This deep dive really shows that the debate over border control, even in allied nations like the UK, it often boils down to these complex, decades-old treaties and fundamentally different views on what a sovereign government actually is and what it should be able to do. So the key question for you listening is probably this. Can strong border enforcement truly be achieved without taking these drastic steps that essentially rewrite a nation's foundational human rights commitments?
And perhaps here's a final provocative thought for you to consider, building on that realization we discussed earlier that the Refugee Convention remains in place regardless of the ECHR. The sources strongly indicate that even if the UK withdraws from the ECHR and repeals the Human Rights Act, other treaties, like the 1951 Refugee Convention and the Trafficking Convention, they still present substantial obstacles to achieve that target of 150,000 deportations annually. So how many layers of international agreements would a nation ultimately need to unravel? How many would it need to leave to truly achieve that no hesitation, no apology control over its own borders?